Have you ever noticed that people who are disciplined in the long run have this one common characteristic? They actually like what they're disciplined about. And I could never relate to that because for me, a disciplined life was always full of effort, willpower, and agony. Turns out I was wrong. I've discovered certain methods that have made discipline feel effortless to me. And since I've been doing this, there is almost nothing that I cannot make myself do and actually enjoy the process. Let's look at what these methods are, why are they useful, and since my goal is to make these applicable, I've made a 3-step process to apply it. But first, let us understand what stops us from being disciplined. Pick an area that you would like to be disciplined in. For example, let's take going to the gym. Which of these scenarios are you more likely to head to the gym? The first one, you're feeling like shit, sleep deprived, and have no motivation. And the second one is, you're feeling amazing, well rested, and have just watched the David Goggins video.
They don't know me, son!
Broadly speaking, when we know exactly what to do, things like how we feel and how much motivated we are for that activity governs whether we take action or not. Then there are also things like lack of clarity, perfectionism, and the fear of failure. This 3-step process destroys all of these as well. Now let's look at the first step of this process, which tricks your brain into doing the thing you need to do despite any fear, laziness, or time constraint. It's lowering the bar for a win. Our brains evolved in an environment where conserving the littlest of energy is crucial for survival. And hence, our brain sees non essential activities as unnecessary and tries its best to avoid it. If you think about it, your mind won't say, I don't feel motivated when a tiger is running behind you. And a lovely mansion and an aesthetic body in the future is quite unnecessary from the perspective of immediate survival. This is where we can be smart and trick our brains. I want you to try this right now. Touch your nose. Actually, do it right now. This is exactly how you trick your brain. When we ask our brains to do a lot of something unnecessary, our brain resists it. But you'd be surprised when you ask it to do a little of something unnecessary, it just complies. Touching your nose was completely unnecessary, but you could still make yourself do it. But if I would have asked you to do 20 push ups right now, that probably would have not happened. So, when we lower our bar for considering exercise as 45 minutes of jogging to 2 minutes of walk around the block, our brain complies. And because of the law of inertia, which says that a thing in motion tends to be in motion, once we start, we often continue longer. This can be applied to anything. The greater procrastination or laziness we feel towards something make the win that much smaller, down to the very nuclear level. These are the steps to becoming a consistency god and make lasting habits. Number 1. Write down your goal with a pen and paper. Based on that goal, write down what your yearly goal is concretely. Based on your yearly goal, write down your 3-month goal. Based on this 3-month goal, write down what daily actions you need to take. Convert this daily action into something that can be completed in 2 minutes, no more. Consider this 2-minute action to be a win and be free to do more whenever you're feeling like it. But never increase the criteria for it to be considered as a win. Number 6, track this 2-minute action daily for extra accountability. So the next time you face procrastination with respect to this activity, just remind yourself how it's going to take only 2 minutes and a little effort to complete. And if you still cannot do it, shrink the win further. Combine this step with the coming two to become as disciplined as a monk. The next step of the process will give you inhuman amounts of motivation and make you crave doing the difficult things. We use the end goal of money, validation, and status as motivation to do things. But these things are external and provide limited power. Science has discovered that there are 5 motivators inside of us that give us prolonged motivation and inspiration to pursue our goals. These 5 are: number 1, autotelicity or love. Autotelic activities are the ones which we do for the sake of themselves, just because we love them so much and not for any end result or reward. Number 2, curiosity. Curiosity is the desire and urge to understand and know things. Number 3, mastery. Mastery is constant improvement in any field with the intent of mastering it. Number 4, autonomy or freedom. Autonomy is how much of an activity is our own free and true choice, and to what extent would it lead to more freedom in the future. And number five, purpose. Purpose is how much of what we are doing contributes to a greater good beyond of us. Let me illustrate the unfathomable power of intrinsic motivators with this example. Let's suppose there's a man and he's pointing a gun at you and you're helpless. What would you do in this scenario? You'd probably run, right? Now imagine this. There's a man with a gun, you and your child with you. The man points the gun at your child. What would be your instant reaction in this scenario? You would jump between your child and the gun, right? In the first scenario, the more likely the man is to pull the trigger, the faster we would run. But in the second scenario, the more likely the man is to pull the trigger, the faster we would jump in front of the gun. What made the difference? I mean, our child did, but what about it? In the second scenario, you acted out of the intrinsic motivator purpose. We believe that it's our purpose or dharma to protect our child. And that's the power of intrinsic motivators over the extrinsic ones. I mean, would you ever jump in front of a gun willingly for some cash? So to harness this power, the reason for doing things must include intrinsic motivators alongside the extrinsic ones. And although this is a mindset switch, the following exercise will help with that. Use a pen and paper to write down the activity you want to be disciplined for. Write what about this activity or its desired outcome connects with the 5 internal motivators. Let us understand these 5 intrinsic motivators with the example of me making these YouTube videos before we look at how we can get the most out of this exercise. In autotelicity, I would write how I love talking about these topics, and I could do that all day. In curiosity, I would write making these videos and researching for these topics makes me learn more about. In mastery, I could write several things. How I'm gaining mastery over my speaking skills, the topics I'm discovering and making videos on, the YouTube algorithm. In autonomy, I would write how this is my own free and true choice. And if this resonates with more people, it would lead to financial freedom in the future. And in mastery, I would write that I love the fact that there's a probability of this actually helping people, even if it's just one person. Be creative and find as many reasons as you can. You don't have to do all 5 intrinsic motivators too. But the more you truly believe and actually feel what you're writing, the more motivation you'll experience for the activity. The final step balances the chemical in our brains and makes hard work and effort feel as enjoyable as scrolling social media. Let me ask you this. There are again 2 scenarios, and in the first scenario, for 20 minutes, you're given a choice between reading a book and using your phone. And in the second scenario, you're given the choice between reading a book or sitting idly doing nothing. Most of us would choose our phones in the first scenario and the book in the second one, except for some nerd bibliophiles. But if you said you would choose sitting idly in the latter situation, think again, because a research has found that students would rather electrically shock themselves than sit idly with their thoughts. This decision is influenced by dopamine in our brains. Dopamine is involved in the pursuit of short term and long term goals. It also governs our feelings of well being or happiness and motivation. As with everything, our brain looks at enjoyment relatively. It compares things. So when we are used to watching porn, scrolling social media, and playing video games for 4 hours, we do not feel motivation for low dopamine activities such as reading a book or going to the gym. We find them to be boring or not enjoyable. To start enjoying these low dopamine activities again, it is paramount to reset our dopamine to a healthy level. This is what I did. Since my well-being and motivation levels are high priority, I quit social media 3 years ago. I do not have a habit of watching porn or listening to music. My YouTube and web series consumption is very intentional. Although I must confess, when I'm feeling very low, I end up using YouTube as an escape. But that is an exception, not a rule. But there's a catch. That's not all I did. There's a reason we do these high dopamine activities. There's a payoff we get from them. We cannot just get up one day and decide that I'm not gonna do this anymore. That would be like putting a bandage on a broken bone. Dopamine acts as an amazing escape from painful emotions, and we use high dopamine activities to escape them. So, if we just give up on these high dopamine activities, A will be supremely bored, and B, this boredom would be extremely uncomfortable because all these emotions would surface. That is why when we decide to let go on high dopamine activities, we must have these two things. Number one, a healthier alternative of these as a short term measure. It could be reading a book, going for a walk or exercising, journaling, learning a skill, meditating, engaging in any creative activity that we like. And although it's a long stretch, just sitting in boredom could be one as well. Number two, a system to process these surfacing emotions as a long term measure. This could include emotion based meditations, journaling again, and therapy. So, if you can go hardcore and quit all of these, amazing. But realistically speaking, we can do these following steps to reach a healthy dopamine level in our brains. I picked these up from Rand Doris. Number one, don't fill your boredom with stimulation. Try embracing things like traveling and waiting in a line without your cell phone. You can journal or maybe read a book. If you must use social media, dedicate a certain time in your day for it, ideally at the end of the day, and stick to that time. Number two, breaks from your work or study should be less stimulating than the work. So if you're reading a book, instead of scrolling social media in the break, stare at a wall or maybe go for a walk. These should be less stimulating than reading the book. And number three, do one activity at a time. Do not stack high dopamine activities. An example could this would be eating junk food while scrolling social media, or even going to the gym with headphones on after consuming coffee. You can connect these three with intrinsic motivators, and that should help as well. So this was the 3-step method. And if you're new to this channel, there is more stuff on topics like personal development and inner work on the way.